What's happening, guys? It's the Cassius Morris Show. Thank you for tuning into episode number 179. I'm super excited about this episode. This one was so much fun. This is sort of like a reunion episode of sorts with my friends Chris Czynszak and Aaron Camaro over in Nashville, Tennessee, hosts of the Decibel Geek Podcast. Fantastic rock and roll podcast. They've done so much for the world of podcasting and this community. You know, there's a community of podcasters. It includes Podkist. It includes Matt Porter from the Kiss Room. It includes Kiss Science Theater. All these guys are the guys that I really started podcasting with and I really started interacting with in this circle, and who really brought me in and showed me a lot of the finer points and finer details of what we do here and how to improve and how to get better. And they've always led the way for what I do, so it's obviously a pleasure to speak with them and reconnect with them. If you enjoy what you see here, please subscribe to the Cassius Morris Show here on YouTube or on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Of course, subscribe to the Decibel Geek Podcast on those platforms as well. And enjoy the crossover podcast here on the Cassius Morris Show.
What's up, Cassius?
Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining me. Of course, the host of the Decibel Geek Podcast, world-renowned rock show. I appreciate you guys for joining me. And also, I've been noticing you guys have been hammering it out with the content like crazy. What types of episodes have you guys been putting out as of late on the music show?
Well, the content has been crazy because we are, today as we're recording this, we released volume 8 of the quarantine sessions. And this began as something, when this all started, it was kind of like, well, you don't really want to take the chance of getting anybody sick. So do we want to, as podcasters that normally record together, do we want to, respect social distancing? And we decided, just to be on the safe side, we should. So we decided we were going to start doing it by phone, even though we're just a county apart. And so what we've been doing is quarantine sessions, and that is just we're answering listener questions, and we have a fun guest on with us, and let the unintentional hilarity begin. And that's pretty much where it all ends with that stuff, especially this last episode.
Oh God. Yeah, my liver is still hurting from last weekend.
I saw this hilarious meme. It said an AA meeting in 2021, and it was just a football stadium full.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that's where we're headed at this point. But no, you guys always know how to have fun and turn it up. Chris, starting with you, how has it been different for you as a podcaster, and then we'll go to Aaron, being confined to the house versus, because you guys did a lot of times where you'd meet up with people, because you guys have access to a lot of artists, right?
Yeah, well, I mean, we're in like the best place we could be for the show we do and what we cover. So Nashville, like, is target-rich environment, I guess, as you could say, for guests. So we have, we really, and we've made a lot of great connections over the years and a lot of good friendships. So, for me, I mean, and I'm sure Aaron would agree, we miss hanging out, we miss being in the same room, and there's a certain chemistry you just get when you're in the same room with somebody. So that's missing a bit, but I think we've adjusted pretty well to it, but it's like seeing Aaron on camera. This is the first time I've seen Aaron in 9 weeks. That's really the craziest thing. Yeah. So
that's crazy.
Yeah, but it's different, I think we'd prefer to be hanging out together and having guests over and doing interviews and all that. But this has worked so well, and it's been a great chance to interact with our listeners. So, we just put the call out for questions, and our listeners come through every time with some of the weirdest questions I've ever heard, but they're always interesting. And but yeah, and then Aaron started this. He had this great idea to start a game show. So it's called Beat the Geek, so it's a trivia show where whoever is our guest that week takes me on, and Aaron plays the game show host and comes up with like
questions.
Yeah, like brain-busting hard questions. So, yeah, I felt a lot smarter 9 weeks ago than I do now.
You were getting busted up in the game show?
Oh, man.
Because I'm the one having to research and find these outside-the-box questions about hard rock and metal, and I try to make them difficult, but I also give 4 choices, so maybe, even if you don't know the answer, you might be able to figure it out. It's been a lot of fun. My lifelong dream is to be a game show host. Now I'm finally getting my chance.
Oh, that's really cool. So is that's something you've always had in the back of your mind?
Just when I was a little kid. That's what I always thought, probably from the Van Halen video. Saw Dave off as a game show host and said, "That's what I want to be."
That's cool. No, that makes sense. It sort of projected. You guys mentioned that you're both in Nashville. Were you guys both based in Nashville always, or did you guys move there at some point?
I was born here, mostly raised here, but my dad was a salesman, so we moved all over the country.
Okay.
So mostly from here, went to high school here, and then moved away, and then came back. But Aaron's not from here.
No, I'm a natural cheesehead from Wisconsin.
There you go. So what brought you from Wisconsin to Nashville?
My mom moved down here, and then my brother moved down here, and I came down here to check it out and was like, wow, there's rock and roll and professional wrestling and all these cool things that a guy can get involved in that we just didn't have back home in my, small town in Wisconsin. And I thought, what a great place to be. I could probably do something here. And then it turned into, getting involved in the pro wrestling business down here, and then meeting Chris and getting to do the Decibel Geek Podcast, which, if I hadn't come to Nashville, none of those things.
Seriously. So how do you guys meet in Nashville?
Backpage Craigslist.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, that's how it was. Eh? The classic.
Yeah. Yeah. I had been doing the show for a few weeks at the time, and actually it was one of those things where it was like, well, and at the time I was okay. I was just trying to do it with like rotating guests every week for a guest co-host. But I was like, I'd like to expand this in some way or get people that are kind of on board with what my idea is. So I really was just putting out a call for anyone who liked the bands that I covered in general to see maybe they would want to help with organizing interviews or write for the site or something. Mm-hmm. And, had a couple of people that didn't really, I'm not going to say try out or whatever, but responded to the ad. And it's funny that one of the people that responded to the ad is actually a friend of ours now, who is a YouTuber named Kimchi Chris. He was one of the people that responded to it also. Did you know that?
In your face, Kimchi Chris. I thought it was a tryout. I won.
But then, yeah. But then, Aaron found the ad. It was just a weird twist of fate, too, because the town that we were both living in the same town at the time, like we lived like 10 minutes apart from each other. So just really weird twist of fate.
Yeah, because at the time, I was actually looking for a real job, something to pay my bills with, 9 to 5, 40 a week kind of thing. And I don't know what it was. Something brought me to his ad that he had put up, his want ad. And I open it up, and it's like, what is this? It's like Kiss, Black Sabbath, Ozzy, like Motley Crue, Guns N' Roses, Metallica. What is this? It's a podcast. I have no idea what a podcast even is at this point. So I'm looking at it going, wow.
What year was this?
This is my job, this is what I need to be doing for a living right here. This sounds great, So I call up Chris, and, he's like, well, we'd like to meet you. And I'm thinking, whoa, man, this is some kind of tryout, So I put on my coolest Kiss t-shirt, my big shiny sunglasses and my lucky bandana and head on over to Chris's house. Like he says, 10 minutes away. I go in thinking, all right, I got to nail this. I got this. I know I got this. These are all my favorite bands. These guys are going to love me. So I go in and meet Chris, and he had actually like a producer that was helping out at the time, kind of.
Mark. Yeah.
And so I met them both, and I'm sitting there like I'm giving an interview for a job. It's all said and done, I finally say, okay, so, what is a podcast? And so Chris explains it to me, like, okay, hey, that sounds great. That sounds cool. So, and then Chris and his buddy say, you got to do this with us. You got to do this with us. And I say, okay, awesome. Sounds great. How much does it pay? That's the funny podcasting punchline.
Yeah, it's like when you start your YouTube channel. So how much do they pay you per video? It's like I fucking wish. Well, I guess if you get enough subscribers, I'm on my way. I'm not there quite yet. So what year was this because you said you didn't know what a podcast is, and I feel like it wasn't too long ago that many people echoed that.
2011. 2011.
So podcasts have been around for 3.5, 4 years.
Yeah, something like that. I guess into maybe a little bit longer, but to the mainstream public, yeah, about that long.
Right. I sort of based it on when Corolla and Rogan really popped. I think like 2008, 2009.
Yeah.
Do you guys find that that there's like a much more widespread awareness for podcasting where you guys are at? Because even where I'm at, it seems like the majority of people know what a podcast is now.
Oh yeah, I mean Nashville. There's a lot. There's a Nashville podcasters group that meets every week, or every month downtown, and I've gone to that a few times. And oh yeah, there's a lot of podcasts. Like people are way more aware of it now than they used to be.
That's good, yeah, because I mean, I feel like it was at least over 50% of people that had no clue what a podcast actually was. So it's really cool to see how far it's come. So when you guys first meet, did you guys like hit it off right away during this interview? And what was the first thing? Do you remember the first thing you worked on?
What was the first thing we did? I don't even remember what the first episode we did
was.
You don't remember it because I'll tell you a funny story. So Chris looks at me and thinks, well, this guy's a rock and roller. He must be a real party kind of guy, so he's going to impress me. So the first thing we're going to record.
Oh, no.
Yeah. No, I'm going to tell the story.
Please.
He asked the question, what was the first thing we ever worked on together? So Chris brings his little soundboard over to the house, and what'd you bring? A fifth something? Some kind of
Jim
something.
This is Jim Beam, I believe.
Jim Beam.
And I'm having just a couple of nice cold Coors Lights. But Chris is hitting Jim Beam pretty hard. So it's time for us to sit down and record. Chris is hammed up. And I say, well, maybe we should try this another time. So the next time we went over to Chris's house, everybody stayed sober. And I think we just kind of shot the breeze a little bit, that first one. It was like an introduction to me. And then it was an intro to the show, and then the show became something Chris had already recorded because Chris already recorded a few episodes.
Oh, right.
Before he found me.
Right.
So, yeah, so then from there, I think the earliest thing was best Kiss songs of the 80s, I think.
It was the 90s.
90s, yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Because I remember you guys would do that, and those were, I do remember those were your early episodes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the
experimentation, and it's funny because we'd come up with different ideas the further we go. Hey, what if we tried this? What if we talked about that? What if we did this as a subject? And the thing I think I love most about podcasting, or at least one of the things I love most about it, is it's such an awesome creative outlet, for a mind that wants to create, because we're still coming up with new ideas, new concepts, because our show is wide open. Yeah, it's about hard rock and metal music, but really, if you can take that subject and just crack it wide open, no limits, and attack it from all different angles, that's what we do. And so it's fun to still, after all this time, even something as simple as the quarantine sessions, but to be able to come up with something new and say, what do you think about this? Let's give it a shot. Maybe it'll work. And 9 times out of 10, the stuff we've come up with has gotten some sort of good response to it.
Yeah, there's a couple things we've tried that didn't work out so well, but most of what we've done, we've come back to. Yeah.
Yeah, well, and I think anybody who's actually actively trying to shake it up and do entertaining stuff, you're going to have stuff that you try that doesn't work as well. I've definitely been in the same situation, but I think it's definitely good when you can tell yourself that didn't work as well. You know what I mean? Instead of lying to yourself and trying to do the same thing,
I'll tell you, there was...
When you got an idea that you believe in so much, and it's like, maybe if we give it one more try, maybe someone will buy into it. But, usually if it's a miss, it's a miss.
Yeah, let me tell this. Aaron will remember this. We were like kind of learning the mixing board back in the day, and I was trying. This was at my old house, and like we were doing this in my dining room, and it was more like a dining nook. There's no doors or anything in this room. It's the pass through from the kitchen into my living room.
You can always tell when Chris's wife was mad because she'd be doing the dishes real loud.
Yeah.
Clang, clang.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like the intro to Detroit Rock City. The
radio.
Right. Yeah. So but like we were learning the mixing board, and I was trying to like find ways to make the show more convenient to not have to spend so much time editing. So I was like wanting to play the sound clips live and stuff. Do you remember this, Aaron? And we wound up just calling the episode "Do It Live" because it was such a train wreck. And like we're trying to cover stories and stuff, and I'm hitting the wrong button, and the wrong sound clip is like firing off, and then you hear me cursing, and then you hear Aaron laughing at me for cursing, and it's like it's still in the archives if anyone wants to listen to it. If you want to hear us trying something and failing miserably, you listen to that episode.
That's funny because I was gonna ask what some of the stuff was that didn't work, but you can actually remember it off the top.
A thing we did called Bracket Buster.
We had a mishap just a couple of weeks ago within the quarantine sessions. I forget which one it was, but I must have had to that first one. We had so many audio issues, but the funniest one I found going back to edit the episode, it was like, well, you think you take your audio issues, you edit that stuff out before you present it to the public. Well, in this instance, the mess ups were so funny that I just left it all in. Because it worked better with the mess ups in there than it did by taking them out.
Right.
That was the content, so to speak.
Exactly.
Yeah, pretty much.
That's the accidental magic sometimes.
Yeah, that's funny. You know, one of the interesting things about you guys' show is I feel like you guys were one of the first online shows to really close in on the interest of Vinnie Vincent.
Who are you talking about?
Yeah, never heard of him.
No,
but
yeah,
would you say that's
true.
fair to say? I mean, I'm not, I think that's fair to say.
So that's pretty fair to say. Yeah, there was a point when I looked at Chris and said, "Are we becoming the Vinnie Vincent podcast?" And answer was, yeah, because we're the only ones stupid enough to be trying to figure this out. But it just comes from being fans of the music, and wanting to know more about this guy. And at the time, he was a recluse. Nobody knew nothing about him or where he was at. And like we were covering him and talking about him in a really good light. And because as a player and as a member of KISS, you got to respect the guy. You got to respect that. Maybe not the guy, but you got to respect that.
The music, at least.
Yeah.
Sure.
So, and then over the years, I mean, then how it all turns out. But yeah, at one time we were definitely the Vinnie Vincent podcast.
Yeah. Well, and we wouldn't have a podcast if it wasn't for him, in truth, because the only reason the podcast wound up happening was before I even started doing the podcast, I was writing a book about him. I had fallen into the rabbit hole online through message boards because there was all this speculation about what had happened to him and all these rumors. And then I had people that I just mentioned on message boards that, somebody should write a book about this guy. And I used to do quite a bit of writing. So I was like, well, maybe I'll give it a shot. And I started just collecting interviews and source material and stuff. And I got about 100 pages in, and then my hard drive completely crashed, and I had no backup, so I lost like everything. I actually did wind up finding some of that stuff later on, but anyway, but I had some audio interviews that I'd recorded through my phone, through like a little dictaphone machine, and that was at the time I started an office job, started getting into podcasting, and I'm like, well, I got these interviews, I should do something with these. Maybe I'll just do a podcast and I'll use them for that, and that's basically how I got the idea to start a podcast.
Wow, so he was an integral piece.
Do what, Aaron?
Was that?
You said dictaphone.
It's a big word like gymnasium. No.
Yeah, I got your dictaphone right here.
So how deep did it run for you guys? I guess let me ask it this way. Did you know that Vinny was in Nashville when you first started doing research? Because you were there as well.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I figured that out pretty early. I mean, he was outside of Nashville for a while, and then I found out he had moved literally about 15 minutes away from where Aaron and I lived at the time. Actually, he lived in the next town over. Yeah, and actually, I was, those annoying newspapers that are just advertisements you get thrown in your driveway every week.
Yeah.
I used to do that as a side job for the local paper. And his house was on my route, so I knew. So I knew exactly where he lived. So, but I didn't tell anybody. And then of course everybody figured out where he lived once he got arrested and everything. But I knew about that very early on.
That's insane. So like, did it make it a little more interesting to you just because it was so close to home, or did it not matter? Because I know like people are interested in celebrities and they're in LA, but it doesn't affect them, type of thing.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely made it more interesting, of course, and being a giant KISS nerd,
I mean, it's 15 minutes from your house.
Yeah. Oh, it was pretty cool. It's like, wow. It's like, the guy's been in hiding all these years, but I know exactly where he lives. I never saw him or anything, but
Right.
yeah, I knew a guy that probably knew too much about what he was up to and gave me that information. And then when I got on that route, I saw the last name on the list. I'm like, oh, well, that's his house.
Oh, so that's how you ended up finding out. So it was from the name, not from prior information.
Both. Like
Both, right.
I had the prior information. And then when I took over that route, I drove through that day. I'm like, wait a minute. And I looked at the last name. I'm like, yeah, that confirms it.
That's incredible. So, and you guys got the chance to interview Vinny.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, which Aaron Camaro predicted years before it ever happened.
Yeah.
Did you?
Well, at that point, when we're doing so many episodes talking about Vinnie Vincent, and Chris said one day, man, it'd be something to be able to interview him. I said, we will one day. I know we will, because we're the only ones talking about the guy. And sure enough, it turned out to be damn good interview too, if I say so myself.
Yeah,
absolutely. Had you guys tried to interview him before in any way?
I mean, we had sent requests, but never got anything back. We could go. I mean, it would take me 3 hours at least to explain all of the, I guess, the digital run-ins we had with him and the issues that there was bad blood between us before we ever met him. There was a lot of
I'm still stuck in that phase.
Well, there was a lot of behind-the-scenes drama. He wasn't appreciative early on of what we were doing about him the episodes about him, and then we almost got banned from the Atlanta Expo, and then I had to go.
Right.
Yeah,
showed up. We weren't sure if we were going to be allowed in.
I had to go through his lawyer, and then finally get assurance that they were not going to ban us from going. It was a whole drama.
And it's kind of just was one of those things that when you're discussing Vinnie Vincent and you're talking about him and his music and, his contributions to rock and roll, you're also talking about him. So, I mean, just like Paul, Gene, Ace, any other human being on the face of the earth, if you're going to talk about him, there's going to be positive and there's also going to be a little negative in there, at least a little bit sprinkled in. Yeah. And so, for as much praise as we would, heap on the guy for his guitar playing, for his contributions to rock and roll, there was other stuff we'd say too, and sometimes in joke. And so it wouldn't be like you could say a million good things about somebody, but if you say one little tiny thing that isn't nice, then
they latch onto that.
Yeah.
Done. That's it. You said that kind of funny but not nice thing.
Well, and also, we'd have guests on those Vinnie Vincent specials that would have not so nice things to say about their experience with him, but we were always like, we always tried to play the impartial interviewer role where we were like, the guest has a right to speak their mind about what they went through. And Aaron would always leave the door open at the end of the episode. If Vinny ever wants to explain his side of these stories, he's welcome to come on.
Right. And then you guys got the chance. So what was it like when you got that call? Like, what's going through your mind?
It was nerve-wracking.
It was exciting for sure, because it was like our white whale.
Right.
Very much, yeah. It was surreal. It was a strange timing how it worked out, because the day that we did the recording was like the actual anniversary of the first episode of our show, which was strange.
That's crazy.
Yeah, and but he gave us a lot of good stuff. It was a good interview. There was some stuff we had to take out later that he was regretting saying. Kind of wish we had left it in now, but
yeah.
But
oops, I uploaded it already.
Yeah.
That's pretty crazy. So he gave you guys the scoop that you wanted.
Yeah, I mean, we focused on just the first Invasion record, so we weren't trying to get a whole career retrospective thing or whatever. But yeah, I mean, I think ours was one of the better ones because it focused on the music and the making of the music, which you didn't get a lot of that from the interviews that he's done.
No, because at the time everybody was kind of because he just come back, the whole Atlanta thing happened, and that's really where it all began for us, because we went down there, we went down there and, just kind of were loose and fun with him, and he liked us and he recognized Chris, and, whatever funny stuff they had going on seemed to be washed away from that. And then after that, of course, everyone's first question, where you been? What about this? What about the dogs? What about the Tupperware? All these, and we said, man, that's not the kind of show we are. We're a show about hard rock and metal music. So let's talk about the music. We figured, what better way to make him comfortable? What better way to get him to open up and talk to us and tell us cool stories than to not come up at him with the same stuff that Eddie Trunk and the next guys down the line from there are asking him the same questions over and over again, which he's just avoiding them anyway because he doesn't want to talk about that stuff, you know? So we approached it from the musical aspect, and he really did open up to us, and he was very cool. And man, when it was over, I gotta believe we high-fived. I'm not sure.
We did. We did.
Well deserved.
Awesome, you know? Nice job.
It was a good day, and I wish that our interaction with him was limited to that day. I should have never taken the next step.
Stop.
Yeah, well, I mean, I don't know how far we want to venture. I think we ventured a pretty good amount into that, but you know, I think definitely people know what's up with him. In terms of some of the other milestone moments, and we can start with Aaron. What has been like the most rewarding part of the Decibel Geek podcast for you?
Oh man. Man, there's so much, you know.
Yeah, I guess if you could name one, I know there must be many.
Rockin' Pod Expo, you know, it's got Rockin' Pod Expo.
Number one on my list, by the way, of travel.
Yeah, well, I mean, if there's one thing that, and there's so many great things that have come along with doing this podcast over the years, from reconnecting with people and making new friends. But man, Rockin' Pod is something else. I mean, it's a convention for people like me, you know, people that love hard rock and metal music, you know, and your chance to come to Nashville, which is Music City, USA, you know, and spend the weekend here, see the sights, and then come to the expo and meet your legendary heroes of rock and metal, and get to see how podcasts are done, because they're getting created right in front of you while all these interviews are going on. You know, you look up on the stage and some cool dude is being interviewed about an awesome album, and you're getting autographs and getting to ask, you know, walk up to the table with Eerie Von from Danzig and ask him that question you always wondered about that first Danzig album, you know, and he'd be like, oh yeah, that's cool, I'll tell you all about that. You can't beat that. And then for me personally, it's all the friendships that I've made through podcasting, because I came from a radio background. So, you know, I came from an environment that was entertainment in this vein that was very cutthroat. You know, that you really had to kind of fight for your spot. Where I come to podcasting, and it's like right away, I'm like, we're going to be number one. You know, we're going to be the best podcast in the world. Nobody's going to stop us. And, you know, screw them guys. And we're, you know, and Chris, man, it's not like that. Calm down. You know, this is kind of like a brotherhood thing. And then it didn't take me too long to figure out he was 100% right, because next thing I know, I'm meeting people like you, Cassius, and I'm meeting people like Ken Mills and, you know, so many other awesome podcasters. BJ Kahuna was one of the first ones, and, you know, all these great people. And it's like, no, I don't want to battle these guys for a spot, you know, because there's plenty of spots for everybody, and I want to succeed, yes, and I want to be the best show I can, you know, that we can make, but I want to see these other guys succeed too. I want to see you succeed. I want to, if this is what you guys want to be doing for a living, that means you're putting your passion into it, and that means someday, you know, when, I mean, you talked about it earlier, the advancement of podcasts from 9 years ago, 10 years ago, how many people knew about it, to this point now. What's it going to be 10 years from now? I'm telling you what it's going to be. We're all getting paid. Oh yeah.
Hey, I could see it, man. And there's been a lot of discussion about that, about the people who've been doing it like since we started and who are still keeping on going. Like, there's only so long that until you're going to be up there, you know what I mean? Like, and I think that we're all on the same trajectory, and I know a lot of comedians too. That's the beauty of it for me, knowing the comedian network and the music network and seeing the similarities of everybody doing their shows. It's just such a beautiful thing. So I definitely think you're right, Aaron. Chris, how about you? Any like standout things that you can really name about doing the show?
Oh man, well, I mean, like Aaron said, it's really just the friendships that we've all made from this. I mean, that's kind of priceless, and that goes above, you know, everything. It's just you never really set out to do that, but then next thing you know, you've got all this giant circle of friends and stuff, you know, and the expo coming out of that whole thing has been, it's just a great way. It's like your Facebook comes to life for a weekend every year. So I enjoy that, even though it's a hell of a lot of work, but yeah, I wouldn't keep doing it every year if I didn't believe in it. And then, yeah, I think, obviously getting to interview some people we grew up listening to. And I think it's also humanized a lot of it, where it's like even people that, you would think were unattainable in the past, you find out that they're just regular people, and that's cool. I wouldn't say that. I would say the majority of our guests, we enjoy talking to them. We don't really hang with them, but there's been a few that have actually become friends. And I think Aaron would agree. Gary Corbett would probably be at the top of that list. So, yeah, he's just one of the super most down-to-earth people that we've met in the business. And just, I have nothing bad to ever say about Gary Corbett. He's just one of the best people.
Yeah, I can call my home people back in Wisconsin and be like, yeah, you remember the Hot in the Shade tour? That dude behind the curtain playing keyboards? That's my buddy.
That's badass. That's so cool.
You know the guy who produced Korn's Follow the Leader? Yeah, that's Toby. That's my dude. He lives right.
What a hotbed for music and entertainment. Nashville is definitely a city that I want to visit. I mean, what a beauty.
Yeah, well, we have to get you to come out next August because we're going to do the Rockin' Pod again, God willing.
Yeah, honestly, I'm 100% down to check it out. It's definitely on my list. So in terms of moving forward, what are you guys looking forward to? I mean, I don't know how close Tennessee is to reopening. I don't know how things are looking, but what are you looking forward to with the show and with the music scene coming up?
It's hard to say what's going to happen with the music scene. I mean, the city is starting to reopen. I can tell you because my day job, what pays my bills and keeps a roof over my head, is I work for restaurants down in the Gulch and in downtown Nashville, some of the nicest high-end restaurants and some of the most award-winning restaurants in Nashville I work for. I do the maintenance for them. So I go in during the day, make sure everything's working good, make sure everybody's experiences when they go in there in the evenings are top-notch as they can be, and that everyone can deliver the goods when it comes to service time. And, man, I've been working my ass off these last 2 weeks. I've been hanging plexiglass everywhere, making sure hand sanitizers on within every 6 feet, and it's crazy. But Nashville is pretty much up and open this weekend, as far as concerts and large group gatherings. That's not happening yet, but the restaurants are open, and if you want to, you can go eat at them, Nice. So it's coming, I suppose, or we're all going to be wiped out in a month and then none of this will even matter.
Yeah.
I guess there's two alternatives. We're pretty much the same here in Edmonton, Canada. We have restaurants opening and we have everything like that. So it's coming up soon. But regardless of what happens in the end, I think we'll be good. And I'm really excited to see what you guys are going to keep doing with the show because it's so great to see that both of us have managed to stay in this game and be consistent. And I'm always really happy to see what you guys have to put out. So where can people find the Decibel Geek Podcast?
Well, before we give the plug, I just want to say, Cassius, you're the one that's got it made because by the time Chris and I and the rest of the podcasters that are our age, because we got into this so late, by the time we're all dead, you're going to be the king of podcasting. You're going to be the only one left because you started when you were like 2 years old.
That's hilarious, man. I want us to all do it together. No, I appreciate you, man. That's really nice of you to say.
But yeah, no, we're excited for the next year because actually right around a year from now, next April, we will hit 10 years old. So we're going to finally hit the decade mark. Wow. So I'm excited for that. And we've, the quarantine sessions has been like a thing where we had some drama with Spotify and we've been kind of changing things up a little bit to focus on more talk heavy stuff. So it kind of forced our hand to go ahead and make some changes, but it's been kind of refreshing because it's keeping things fresh. So we're going back to the drawing board and we're changing things up. But no, we have a lot of things we still want to do. There's a lot of people we still want to interview, a lot of albums we still want to cover. So yeah, I'm just happy doing this show now as I was 9 years ago. I have yet to feel bored by it or anything.
That reminds me, Chris, I talked to Stevie Rochelle today, and he's up for coming on and doing some more talk for Albums Unleashed. Yeah.
Oh.
So we always got something in the fire. We got something cool coming up. The thing I always wonder is when do we transfer out of the quarantine sessions and become what Decibel Geek Podcast needs to be going forward? Right now, we're having so much fun doing the quarantine sessions that you kind of don't want it to end. You almost wish the show could be like this all the time, but there's a certain level of what is the word, education we like to provide. We found out recently we're a couple of really, really funny dudes. Like, people really
I would say so.
at our masses. So, by doing the quarantine sessions, it's been kind of like improv a little bit, a couple of drinks in the mix and see what happens. But they've been a lot of fun. It's been loose. We haven't done any real homework in a long time, except for me with game show questions. But that's always a plus. But, I kind of miss, like, when we put like a year in review, for example. It's been a long time since we've done a year in review. We really are due for one because it's been a long time. Now, the thing is with year in review, and I learned this a long time ago, before I was even a part of the Decibel Geek podcast, I listened to an old episode of Decibel Geek before I did the first recording with Chris. And Chris had a guest on there that was talking all kinds of nonsense about stuff he didn't even know about. And so when Van Halen fans caught wind of that, they took his ass up. So I learned then and there, I know you're smiling, Chris, you know who I'm talking about.
Seems to.
A fellow Canadian of Cassius's, I don't know. But this guy, he didn't know what he was talking about, and the fans tore him up. So I said, man, I got to know my stuff. I got to put in the work and do the research. I can't rely on Wikipedia. I got to dig a little bit deeper than that. I don't want to get caught up in, this guy don't know what the hell he's talking about. So when you do a year in review episode, it takes weeks to research that shit sometimes. Like, you almost got to know a month ahead of time we're going to do it. So it's not something I'm really looking forward to jumping back into. But on the other side of that, it's something that I really miss doing. So we'll see how it goes coming forward. But who knows what you're going to get with the Decibel Geek podcast. We're a couple of creative dudes, and we're always trying to come up with new angles and new ideas and new fun, exciting, and laughable things to talk about with hard rock and metal. There's all kinds of ways to do it. We tried all different kinds.
Beautiful. I absolutely love that. And I encourage everybody to check out the Decibel Geek podcast. It's on Apple Podcasts and pretty much everywhere you can get your shows. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining me. It's been an honor. And there you have it. My exclusive podcast with Chris Czynszak and Aaron Camaro from the Decibel Geek podcast. I want to thank the gentlemen so much again for coming on the show. Make sure to follow them and subscribe to their program. It's fantastic. If you're a rock fan, you do not want to miss a second of this. Follow me on Twitter at Cassius Morris, Facebook.com/Cassius Show, Instagram at Cassius Morris _. And of course, make sure to subscribe here on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your shows. Thanks so much for tuning in. Until next time, this is Cassius Morris saying, rock on.